what we're looking at here is the Android camera as a webcam using DroidCam software and OBS. So when we think about setting up the 2x2 game table, you can see the perimeter here. We have basically two different kinds of labeler. Let me finish these figures first. And there we are. Two different kinds of labelers. First one, most reliable, the one that has the best features. It'd be the brother labeler. This is really kind of the better of them all. This is interesting because it's a 3 camera configuration. Let's go like that. So if I take this and go back here, there we go. It's interesting. I can almost use these 3 cameras to create a scan and then do an image on a laser image printer, a 3D printer. So anyway, this is really the best. It has a lot of the best features for it. It's also battery operated, which is what we're using it with now. It's fine. I think there's 6 AA batteries in there, which is fine, and it works really well. Once you figure out the font style and the 2-line or 1 single line layout, the labels will come out of here. And right now we've got a clear label in there with white lettering. So it comes out of here. You snip it manually by pressing this down, and then apply your tape to the stands. You can use clear, or you can get various other colors and so on. But right now, because we're using clear bases, we are using clear tape. So that's what we use for the labeling. The other one that we use is the traditional, very common Dymo labeler. This again is a very good machine, and this is a white plastic. So it's not clear, it's a solid white with, I believe, black lettering. So these are all good. I think this one actually needs batteries. I think I got a notification the batteries are out. But this is also a really good one to take, especially to conventions. And they both have very good features. So when we think about how to lay out the game table, that's kind of where we're at. Anyway, so we're going to lay out a new game table. Now, just in the action of moving aside the buildings, look at that. That's a cute little photograph, isn't it? Of an odd thing. I mean, not an odd thing, of a scene. And I just did that. I mean, just push the stuff aside and look what that is. That looks really interesting. So, you know what? Let's take that and then just put it in here. Interesting. Now you can go into your stock of various fields, cornfields, plowed fields, and so on, and start to pretty up this situation. Well, let's try putting down a road. So let's do like road first or hills? What do you think? Here's one way of verifying what roads we are using. We need to make sure that we are using the proper roads. This does not look like. This is the road that is laid out for a transition from flat hexes to corner hex. So, but for now, we'll pretend it's for side-to-side layouts. I know this little piece is meant for side-to-side, so we'll put him in there. And here's where you see, just like our other video when we talk about putting roads down, here you see the issue when you want to create suddenly a intersection. This is not a deliberately cut situation. This is kind of a kludge where one thing meets another. It's not deliberately cut to be an intersection. So that may cause issues with the rest of the road going down. So we'll have to wait and see, because neither one of these pieces is meant to be like that. Here is really, I think, what it's meant to be. Something like this. So let's try that. This guy is meant to be a kind of a fork in a road situation. And that looks correct because, why? Because when you put it in position, it meets the flat-to-flat hex layout, but it also importantly meets the flat-to-flat hex layout down here, barely. All right, so back to our little scene here. Have we changed it significantly? Kind of. So let's do it like this and leave our house scene. See, right away it looks interesting, right? We'll start to put fields and fences down, and then we'll see how things turn out. And this one here looks like side-to-side layout. So that one's a good one. So that's where we kind of have the layout. And here's where you see what I meant about the intersection. This road section is deliberately made for an intersection. All right, so that's pretty good. That's interesting. Now, I don't know if you want to put houses, right next to the road, because remember, even if you were to have a fence, that fence there has to be room for it. This is one of our fence layout that we did. Now, this is not the legal layout. This is just something we did a while ago. This actually might be laid out for a 4-inch hexagon, the size object. That might be laid out for 4 inches. By the look of it, I think it is. So we, a long time ago, used to use 4-inch hexagons and quickly realized that 2.5 was better. That's why this looks the way it does. It's still pretty. It's a nice looking, realistic kind of a road layout, but it doesn't fit perfectly. So we just try and use it sometimes. Here's an example. So you got your little road. So the fence can sit like that. The building should probably be, well, regardless where it is, it needs to be someplace where it's not going to be too, obtrusive. So maybe something like that. That's this is almost starting to look like Chancellorsville, like the Chancellor's building or something of that nature. But at any rate, that's where we're starting to see this thing take shape. And here are some fence sections that we've got. And again, we had said in another video that the only way to really do this legally is to have all the fences adhered, glued down to either fabric or pieces of cardstock or cardboard, because that's the only way to keep the fields from being multiple ridiculous sizes and shapes and unsustainable, repeatable. And that's what we're all about here, because if we're doing simulcasting where one player has the exact same layout as the other player and both players have their own armies that they're moving on the table, then all the terrain needs to be exact, and that's what this is all about. So these are some split rail fences that we've got, which probably might be a little out of scale. They might have been made for 28 millimeter, because look at the size of them, they're really tall. So we're going to put those aside and go back to these HO scale size fences. This is the typical Lifelike or whatever brand. And we're going to put these in, because see, we don't care what it is. Fence, wall, doesn't matter. It's cover in regard to the game, to the rules. Cover is cover. So it could be a fence, it could be a wall, it doesn't a hedgerow, it doesn't make any difference. And because of that, you can use anything. So we can make this. This is really kind of meant for a very attractive little farm, probably for horses or something of that nature. But that's a nice little white fence, and we've used these often. That's a good looking little fence. But this pack, that is, I believe it's either Lifelike or other brand plastic fencing, is the easiest, and that's why we've got so much of it. So we'll put these down for a fence, and then we'll seal it off, so that it's not too big of a layout. And then we'll wait on the rest of it and see what we come up with. So here is the rest of the road needs to go in. This one here is just a two-length hexagon road, and we're missing a little piece here. So let's set that aside and grab another one. We're just looking for a short road section to put down here. And let me show you also what we talked about when it came to the legal fences and fields, because they all have to be the same in order to be repeatable. That's an example right there. That's a 4-hex farm field, and again 4-hex. So the way we configured this was we put the hexes in like this because we just wanted it to be a 4-hex without any strange orientation to the hexes. That's it. So that's why it's drawn like that. That's why you see the pattern like that. It's inside there. And you may not be able to see it that well on this one, but it's exactly the same pattern. So no matter how you put this on the game table, it will always be there's where the hexes are inside that field. Even though there's a hex right here, moving into the field means you'll count this hex. So this thing could have the orientation like that, or it could be any orientation. But regardless, when your forces move into it, it'll always be that's a hex. So they will move from a hex to the hex. You don't have to count this little weird guy or this little weird guy, I should say. Don't bother counting that because there it is. So if you were positioned here and you were going to move into the field, you would count this one right here as a hex 1, and then you would count this one here as a hex 2. So again, if the orientation was strange like that, and the unit was here, this would be, you'd have to judge the majority of the hex that's visible. So for instance, you could say, okay, that's another hex right there, fine. So this would be starting hex 1, 2, 3. That's how you would do it. You simply have to do something that makes the orientation of the hexes in here easy to see and consistent. So that's the point of that. So instead of putting down just a crazy amount of fences, you put down a whole field, and that's it. And then another one, say you want to have a field right here, but you're legislating the use of strict repeatable objects. And that, therefore, if you want to have a field right there, just put the entire fence right there, just put the entire field in place. Okay? And so there's your fence, but because it has to be legislated in order to be repeatable and consistent all the time. So it's an entire field of fence, not just a row or single line of a fence. It's the whole field. Again, that's why we have these little strips, individual fences, but it's a question of should you really use them or not, we don't know. Because if you were to keep legislating shapes, then how would you do an entire, how would you do an entire row covered in, or a road covered with a line of fencing? You really can't, because you'd have to have this shape and then going down the road. So you can't do that. So you do have to say, maybe, instead instead of having to legislate, let's get that guy out of the way because he's just an oddball. Instead of saying no individual fences, say, yeah, you can use individual fences, right? Just say, yeah, you can. Okay? And you have to accept the fact that the other player in the simulcast has to have the exact same lengths. So whatever that length is, make all your fences the same length. So it's exactly unmistakable when you go to grab one that it's going to be exactly the same fence. So then, okay, you're going to put a whole bunch of fences down this road. There you go. Okay, just keep doing it. Like that. And I'll find that road right now and put it in place. So what I'm saying is that you get to a point where, you know, it's questionable. Should you just put another field down, a whole field, or just go ahead and continue with the single fence? I don't know. You know, you'll have to just kind of play it by ear. But let's do the roads first and then come back and talk more about the hill placement. Now I've grabbed some other trays of terrain, including terrain of rivers. But for now, let's just continue with the road situation. These look to me like the normal legal roads for flat-to-flat layout. So let's grab and finish off our road idea, which might be this right here. Nope, not quite. So let's grab another one. There we are. All right, so that completes our road layout for this battle. Now, you could say, whoa, wait a minute. That's a little limiting. Let's put another road in. Let's put a road in here. Oh, that's interesting. Wait a minute, Terry. How are we going to do that? The hexes don't obey when you do corner to corner. The road. See? This is the reason why you had to make two different kinds of road. Because in this particular case, you're going to put down a road section that's going to go from corner to corner of the hex and then repeat all the way down. That's why you had two different kinds of roads. That's the reason. So here it is right there. A little short, but maybe that's acceptable. You're doing kind of an intersection, right? Let's make it an absolutely accurate one by doing it like that. Okay, a little bit off, but that's the reason you've got foamies, because you can cut whatever length you need immediately on demand. That's the beauty of these things. So if I wanted to, I could grab another, well, here's a piece that's almost exactly a workable length. So there we are. So that's what we'll do. Kind of a weird intersection. All right, so it's a road that's at an angle, then it has another guy, that is kind of weird, coming off of it, and then it immediately turns and goes. So it's kind of interesting, right? It's an oddball. Here is printed on cardstock the hill that we were just talking about, or the field that we were just talking about with that orientation. And here's another brown one. Can't quite see it. It's the same pattern. So there's two fields, all the same size, ready to be made with fences or walls, whatever you want, glued, or nothing. You could just use these, put them down, and then put whatever fence you want. That's why I did this. So you could do whatever fence you want to put around it. Here is a large piece of something we discovered online, and we actually know what we did is we took a graphic of a field, wheat, and printed it, and that's what this kind of looks like. So again, but it's straight hex, properly oriented hexagons, and we're not using that kind of a field, so that goes over here. putting it off the table as a reference. Here is an example, and unfortunately we've changed to this. Here's an example of a fabric with a hedgerow. And the reason that we did this was so that it can go up and down a hill. And that's what I'm about to show you right now. So this is the segmentation we were talking about. It can go up the side of the hill, and I'll put a hill down and show you. It might be best to just take your fence material, whatever it is, wall, rustic fence, bush, and glue it down to fabric. And put the fabric down. Don't a strip of fabric. The entire sheet is what you should probably not do. That's why this is not going to be, this is not going to stand. So this is going to go away, and we're going to glue the segments onto strips of fabric. So why would you do this? Here's the reason why. So that instead of these individual pieces, you create uniform lengths of fabric with a wall or a bush or whatever it is. Again, we don't care. Attached to it. Uniform lengths, the same length as this, but in fabric instead of hard cardboard, like this. So in truth, all your fences of your entire collection could all be done on strips of fabric, so that you don't even have to worry about the fact some of them are hard cardboard and some of them are fabric. Put them all on fabric. Again, the reason for that is so you can make little things like this. Again, it's a World War II with the hedgerow situation. Another thing, you can go around corners easier because the strips are smaller. Now, our game table is looking pretty interesting. Let's do one more hill, and it's probably going to be something up in that area. Let's do a fairly big hill again, but it's kind of round. And should we take up the whole space? Maybe like that. Now, that's pretty big. That occupies quite a bit of territory, and it really kind of changes our scenery, doesn't it? Whereas if we have just the one hill, which is going to be the focal point of anybody coming into this combat area, this guy kind of takes it away a bit. We could put over here. Let's see if that works. Now that makes it pretty congested. That's a pretty congested, I was going to say playground. That's a pretty congested field right there. That's something, I don't know if I like that. Okay, so let's try a totally different one. Let's go with a hill that's only either 3, 2, or maybe 4. Let's try, here's a 4. Cut off the entire, maybe do an orientation that's different, as opposed to following the hex pattern. This would be following the hex pattern like that. Right? What if we didn't follow? We don't need to. We can do anything we want. It's just you need to understand when you're moving how to count. Let's put the field, or let's put the hill, right there. That's a long ridge. Or, like this. There's a road, and then there's this ridge. Okay, you can see that there's quite a few opportunities. Let's make it really complicated. Let's put in this 3 guy right here. So essentially this is one whole ridge, but there's a rut in between. You could say just ignore that. Okay? And maybe someday we'll have some kind of a bridging system so you could put the two together. But actually, this is a 3-level hill. We didn't put a 4th level on this yet. We have to do that. Let's grab an actual proper height 4 level, 4 hex. There we go. A proper height. And it's the Battle of Big Ridge. So you can see that there's a gap. That's all we can do because this is legal. This is legal. But in this particular case, we want to do something a little different. We're using the shapes. We're trying to come up with something different, you know, right? So you got to see that we're trying to do something, but you just got to be careful. You don't want to get carried away. You're defeating the 2x2 game table a little bit. You're splitting 1 hex right there in half, which is fine. And it's not following the hexagon grid pattern, but that's fine. But then when we want to add this guy right here, you know, you say, okay, well, there's the hex, there's the neighbor hex, okay, right? Or does putting this guy away make it different? Maybe this is a random event. We roll to see yes or no, placing that there, placing it over here, placing it over here, or nowhere. So once you're done with the layout, you go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That doesn't quite work. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 7, 8, 9, 10, no hill. So that takes it away from the designer and makes it something else. Before I go, and before the battery runs out, I'll show you the last thing. Here is a snake fence layout that's been applied to fabric, which is going to have to come apart now. But that's what this is, a really large field, very large field. Again, we may save it, we may just leave it alone, but in order to be repeatable, the hex grid layout has to be the same, and it isn't anymore. So this will have to probably come apart, and there are other things that may have to change with this. I think we're going to take this apart and re-glue these into, or just cut them into strips, let's put it that way. No, because they have to be segmentized. In order to go up and down the hills, that field has to be segmentized, so that one's got to be done as well. So that goes off to one side. All right, so there we are. That is our little quick, well, not so quick video on establishing terrain based on the original little picturesque little 2-building layout.